Don't you walk on me.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to episode 57 of the Brooklyn Fishing Club podcast. I'm your host, Victor Lucia, founder and president of the Brooklyn Fishing Club. Before we dive into the episode, as promised, I have another promo code for everybody. For a limited time, we're offering lifetime memberships to the club. We only offer 5 of these each year. Whether you're a hardcore angler or just love our awesome apparel, it's a one-time payment that grants you lifelong access to the club. And wait for it, you'll also get a sweet gear package from us shipped for free every year for the rest of your life. Use the code LIFE in all caps for 50% off lifetime memberships. These usually sell out pretty quickly, so head over to brooklynfishingclub.com today and get one while you still can.
A guy named Matty Tambor had an idea, crazy idea, to give captains a literal truck inner tube and let them design a raft. So the raft tournament began from the brain of Matty Tambor, and he was involved with Louis McCarty, who they had a kind of a film company. They shot some shows. I think it was called The Bite TV, and they filmed this, so it became something that they thought was an inspiration for a good TV show. And they gave about the first year, I'm going to say about 15, somewhere around 15 or 20 guys, and that were interested in doing it, an inner tube, and it was your job to create the frame of the raft. So some guys went all out. One guy, I think it was Joe Niebuhr from Contender, built an aluminum framework, in his pipe shop, with 20 rod holders. I mean, I have no idea what that cost. And it had a curved frame for the inner tube to cradle inside. You'd inflate the inner tube. And, there were people that had rafts so big, they used, one guy on the scatterbrain used a davit to hoist it off the bow of like the 54-foot Hatteras and launch it into the water. Me being the son of a plumber, I went to Home Depot, and for about $48, I bought all the PVC fittings and a sheet of plywood. So
there you go.
I just used half a sheet, 4x4, and I just built, a square frame and integrated about, 16, 18 rod holders, which were 1.25 PVC or 1.5 PVC tubes with a 1/4-inch bolt at the bottom for a gimbal pin. And, you just imagine sitting inside this square frame, but the inner tube was round. So you kind of sat on the inner tube, and all the rod holders were outside the inner tube. So you had 6 rod holders going towards the kites, 3 for each kite, and then had a couple flat lines, and had to have a couple rod holders for the, hand crank kite reels. This was before they had, wireless kite reels. And so it was like an afternoon half, you'd go, the tournament was like 1 to 5, and we did it in the spring. And it was really interesting because everybody got their inner tube, and no one would talk about their design. So the morning of the tournament, we all show up at Miami Beach Marina, and everybody's got their rafts, and it was like a car show. Everybody's walking around checking each other's design.
How many people were in it, do you think?
I want to say 15 to 20.
Cool.
It was a good group. And what you would do is have like an open fisherman that you would put your raft in, and then that guy would be your spotter. So they got everybody out on the edge, and they would separate everybody by like a 1/4 mile and just drop rafts, just like parachuters, just as you went down the line.
Yeah.
I think we drew numbers. So, say 1 to 20, and obviously you wanted to be the north raft because he's going to drift into the fish first as they're swimming south. And so you although the challenge was, we quickly found out, is you can't chase a fish. So you'd hook these fish and they, stretch your way out. And in that first year, I got a pretty good number. I was up near the north end, pretty close, and I ended up catching 3 during the tournament, and that was enough to win. And
What'd
I
you
think
catch them
2,
on? What?
just whatever live baits we had, goggle eyes, pilchards,
Wait,
thread
so
fins.
let me get this straight real quick. I didn't want to interrupt you before, but are you saying that you were running kites off of the inner tube?
Sure. Yeah, 2 hand crank, like, 9
That's
Senators,
wild, man.
little short kite rod. So it was a lot of work because remember, if you popped a clip, you had to hand crank everything and you're drifting down on it with wind, right? So all your slack lines are coming towards you. And it was, it, nothing has ever made me appreciate my crew more than that tournament. Just the fact that you're kind of on an island by yourself trying to manage all this stuff. And then you'd hook a fish. And it didn't matter if it was a bonita, it was an
Yeah.
ordeal. Fighting it, wrapping around all the lines, whatever. You had to solve all your problems.
Right.
And your chase boat would come in and give you more bait or whatever you needed. But really, you had to fix everything. So, everybody caught a few whatevers, bonitas, kings, sails, whatever. But right before lines out, I think the second place boat had 2, and I had 3. And so we were all happy. And as they're counting down the last 60 seconds, I get covered up with 4 sailfish at one time.
Oh my
And
God.
I hooked them through the whole lines out. So, I mean, we didn't even count them. Like it didn't matter because we had won. And so I actually hooked all 4 fish and had them all tight in the holders. And I'm calling Kelly and the gang, over, Charmaine was there. Another buddy of ours was running the boat and called them all over because I was exhausted. I really did not want any part of this. And so they call on the radio and they see 4 fish jumping and they're like, "Hey, Ray's got 4 on, but he's after hours, And they said, don't take the rods, let him fight him. We want to come over and get video because they're filming a TV show." So we kind of, acted like it was during the tournament and I ended up catching all 4 of them, and they gave you a 1-point bonus, which I thought was a really smart thing to do. If you subdued the fish enough to get a tag in them, you get a 1-point bonus.
Nice.
So I got all 4 of them tagged.
Whoa.
when at one point all 4 of them were swimming the same direction, and I felt my raft digging in, like going underwater, and I had to lean on the backside, just get away from the rods. I mean, all kinds of weird things like that.
That make you appreciate the ability to back down on them?
Oh, buddy. But I learned a lot about sailfish doing that. I did 3 of those tournaments, and they had 4 of them, but I missed 1 year. But you learn it's almost every sailfish would run out somewhere between 200 and 400 yards, and then they would run out of steam, and then they would just put their dorsal fin up and circle the wagon. And you would just fight them in a circle, and the circle would get smaller. You spiral them in. Every once in a while, they'd make a little run, and they get tired, and then they'd circle some more. And it would just take you like 30 to 45 minutes to catch a fish. The advantage of 4 is you were going through that process all 4 at one time, so it didn't take that much longer to catch 4.
Got it.
They all got gassed out and, caught them all. And it was just an amazing experience. And so won that year, and I won the next year. And then
damn, bro.
Peter won a year, Peter Miller, and then and I came in like second to the Scatterbrain the 4th year, I think it was. So it was really an amazing experience.
So 3 out of 4 years, the Get Lit team won.
Oh, exactly. That's exactly right.
That's awesome, man.
Represented. Yeah.
Unbelievable. They should bring that tournament back. That sounds fun, man.
Yeah, Peter and I actually talked about that the other day because we both said how much that was just one of the most special tournaments that we ever fished. And we actually talked about it a couple of weeks ago.
If you guys ever get serious about that and need somebody on board to just help with the logistics or help organize stuff, I am all in, bro. So please keep me in mind. I would love to see that come back. It's just, it sounds so cool. Experience. Honestly, for everybody listening in the Northeast, that would be a pretty cool tournament for striped bass, guys. Maybe you guys should put that together up there. Maybe the Brooklyn Fishing Club will put it together, and we'll do that this summer.
There you go. I mean, the whole idea was to take away all the conveniences of machinery.
Right.
You can't go chase them down. You can't, walk over to the tackle center and, get some more tackle to retie. You had to have everything. Your pockets were full of stuff. And, it was a mess.
Did anybody sink? Because it's like with those sailfish and those bills. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
what if they popped the
Oh,
tube
yeah.
and they went down? Anybody
Yeah.
go down?
Well, one guy did have a sailfish pop his tube, and it's another thing. It was kind of cool. He took his chapstick and shoved it in the hole and fished the rest of the tournament.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we're talking MacGyver stuff going on.
I wonder if
There
his
were
dad was a plumber too.
That's it.
Right?
So several sharks circling, all kinds of crazy things happened.
Man.
One guy tipped his raft over and didn't have bungees on his rods, and all his rods dumped. Oh yeah.
Rough afternoon right there.
So after that, we all put leashes on everything,
Yeah. Holy shit. Oh man, it sounds like so much fun though. I mean, would you say that that tournament gave you more of an adrenaline rush than, let's say, like a tournament that you're competing for like $1 million?
Yeah, I mean, when you were done with that tournament, you crawled in your boat and you laid on the floor. You were so exhausted because you're hand cranking the kites, and of course, you got to keep up with the Joneses, right? So as soon as one guy's flying 2 kites, everybody's got to fly 2 kites.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, and nowadays they'd probably allow the little battery powered kite reels. That would be much easier, but. Anyways, you can take that away too if you want to torture people.
Yeah, no. If we do this again, or if you guys do this again, let's torture them.
Okay.
Let's make them earn it.
Yeah. Make them suffer.
Yeah, make them suffer like you guys had to win it. Come on.
Things
are too easy for these kids nowadays, anyways.
So. I was just gonna say, it's like back in the old days, we walked uphill to school both ways.
Exactly. 20 miles in the snow. Oh man. But let's talk about a few of these. Let's talk about a few more of these pictures you sent me. I would love to hear the backstories on them, as I'm sure our listeners do. Let's start with this this giant mako shark that you have laying across your lap like a golden retriever. How much did that weigh? What's the story behind that? Who's the guy to your left in the picture? What was the story there?
Well, it was a really cool story. It was a guy named Glenn Heitman, and he actually fishes all the Northeast tournaments. He lives up there, and I can't remember the name of the boat he's on, but he's always sending me pictures of him with trophies and stuff. He's a very avid fisherman. But this was I would say back in the early to mid 2000s, and nighttime sword fishing was really popular. And he called me to go sword fishing one night, and I want to say it was Father's Day, or for some reason none of my crew were available. They all had plans. I think it was Father's Day, and it's kind of a short notice trip. And Charmaine and I had been fishing on the Get Lit, with Peter and Kit and Froggy, swordfish tournaments. So, she had enough experience that I thought she and I could just go do it. And what are we gonna deal with? Maybe 100-pound sword. We'll be fine. And so we go out there, just the three of us. Glenn was by himself, and he had always mentioned, wanting to catch a sword and a mako, either one. So obviously we're fishing mono leaders. We're not thinking mako would ever happen. But believe it or not, we hooked that fish. Charmaine gets on the leader. I'm thinking it's a big sword. It was, pitch black dark, and I never saw the fish. I kind of remember it jumping, but we just assumed, that it was just a big sword. She gets on the leader, gets halfway up the leader, and she turns around. I'll never forget the look on her face. She goes, "It's a giant mako," and I'm like, "You are kidding me!" Mono leader. Glenn really wants the fish.
Mono leader, mako shark. What?
So here's the best part. I didn't have a gaff.
Oh, nice. What are you gonna mouth it?
I had a harpoon with a dart and rope. I mean, dart and cable swivel. But I didn't have, for some reason, I didn't have the rope. And I can't remember, the rope basket was on my other boat or whatever, I had multiple boats. And so the only thing I could come up with is I rigged up one of our other swordfish rods to that cable and swivel. And when she leadered him up, I darted him and had another rod that Charmaine took. So now we got him on a dart and a hook with monoliter, and basically just kept fighting them. I mean, that was the only solution I had. I didn't have a flying gaff, and I didn't have a rope for the dart. So,
Working with what you got.
as usual, charter boat scenario, you're trying to figure out a plan. And we fought it like another half hour, got it up on the leader. And the only thing I could do is I had a long fillet knife, like a 12, 14-inch blade. And when it came up, it was pretty tired. And I jammed that knife in its gills and it started bleeding. Of course, we did it very quickly, one shot. The thing took off, but it was pumping blood pretty good. Came back up, just did that a few times and finally got it bled out. And basically, I did have a meat hook, and I got a meat hook in it, and we hoisted. I didn't have a tuna door, and believe it or not, we took a dock line, went up over the tower, and just Glenn and I lifting, and Charmaine pulling down on the rope and cleating it on my tower leg holder, and we finally got him high enough to swing him in the boat, and that's the picture.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
that is incredible, bro.
Yeah, we called him 500. He was a nice fish.
Oh my goodness.
That is just
unbelievable, man. I mean, how much, let's talk about how much skill versus luck played into that. Cause we're talking about a 500-pound mako shark on mono, which I'm just still trying to wrap my head around. I'll probably be trying to wrap my head around that all day. I mean,
just total luck. Hooked him right in the corner of the jaw, but it was chewing on the hook. And all he had to do was swing, if he would have turned the right way and got the leader across his teeth, it would have been over. But he just kept digging that one direction, and we never got cut off. And so lucky. That's part of why it was such a special memory. Charmaine and I never had an experience like that again. It was so cool. And Glenn, I talked to Glenn the other day, actually. We still keep in touch.
That's so cool, man. Oh my gosh. I mean, all these stories, it's like you just keep, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like you just kept getting better and better and better and better. Like
we had plenty of broken hearts, we had a lot of big ones that got away, but if you fish long enough, you have a few victories.
Definitely. Let's talk about this picture with the swordfish, and is that your son on your lap?
That was a guy named Scott Loans, very dear friend, and took up swordfishing one night, and he was friend of the family. My kid, he and his family had a private school here in Miami, and eventually my kids went to his school, so we're still really close friends. And we caught that sword again, in the early days of nighttime fishing, and just wanted to get that, kind of like that picture you showed me of you and your son. It's just one of those moments where I just was so happy. My son wanted to go, and we just kind of made a bed for him and let him sleep. You can see in the picture he's pretty drowsy.
Yeah, he looks like he just woke up, and he's like, am I dreaming? What is happening right now?
What is this thing? But it was a nice size sword we got with Scott, and it was just one of those, for me, a happy family photo.
Oh yeah. How old is he in that shot?
I want to say I just want to say 5 years old, 6 years old, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. So did you wake him up so that he could see the fight?
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
He, of course, at that age, and he didn't really comprehend what was about to happen, but it got real when we put him in the boat.
Did he get all excited? What was his reaction like?
He loved it. It's always for kids. That's just the coolest part of showing them new things they've never seen. It opens the world. This is what's out there.
Absolutely. It's so cool. So cool. So how about this picture with this big yellowfin tuna? Is that a yellowfin or is that a bluefin?
On the deck?
No, it's with you, and I think that's your son that's now older, and you have your arm over his sholders.
Oh, that's a bluefin we caught.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was a bluefin.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Yeah. So, you see my shirt's a little wet?
Yep.
That's the first time I got yanked out of a boat.
No way.
Oh, yeah. That was his first bluefin, and the thing just was pinwheeling, and I just reached a little too far, laying on the bow of a 39 CV, and I thought I could grab, like under the gunnel and hold on, and lost my grip, and he yanked me.
Oh, my
So I
gosh.
held onto the gaff for, I hit the water and held on, just kind of tried to, hang on as long as I could. And then one of the other guys got a gaff in him, and I swam around the back of the boat. And
Wait, so
it
you
was
were
just a
in the
cool
water
moment.
with the gaff in the fish?
Yeah, just trying to keep him, hoping someone would get another gaff in him, and
That
they
is
did.
legendary, bro. Oh my
And,
God.
so I got a video of it when I climbed in the boat. I gave him a hug and said, "Whatever it takes, buddy." It's just
That
it's
is
his first
so
bluefin, and
cool.
I've been waiting so long to go do that with him. It was so cool.
And was this a bluefin in Miami or was this up
No, this
north?
is Nantucket.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, I was gonna say a bluefin in
So
Miami is probably pretty rare.
yeah.
Have you ever seen that before?
So one of the privileges of being in the charter business is you get to fish with a lot of young guys and help them get started. And this was Billy Casanave that runs the double take for the Lindner family that spends time in Florida and up there. And the mates were Chino and Carson. All three of them had started out working for me, so they had invited me up to fish with them in the summer and bring the kids. And this was the first time we ever took were able to do it together. So my daughter and Cheyenne and then my son Dakota and I went up there, and it's just an amazing trip, and got to fish with Brett Wilson on the hindsight out of Cape Cod. He and I did like 12 seasons together. Although he started out not with me, but we worked together, on the charter on our boats for like 12 years, and just to be able to go up and visit those four guys and have these experiences was just life changing for me and the kids. It's just something we never get to do.
Sounds like it was an absolutely epic trip.
Yeah,
Oh man, so
good
cool,
time.
dude. You have had so many. When are you gonna write a book, Ray?
uh, I'm just remembering it. That's all. Just swims around in my head. I love all the memories.
And then we got
Yeah,
this other picture you sent me with another giant bluefin across the deck. Was that from another trip up to the water? Looks really
no,
blue. It looks like you might have caught that
yeah,
in the Bahamas or something.
that's exactly right. Very
Wow,
observant.
nice.
That was I've always been pretty obsessed with bluefins. Being, it's obviously like when you live in Miami, you want to go snow skiing. My kids are crazy about snow skiing, right? So I've always been fascinated. The captain I worked for when I was young, Bill Harrison, fished Cat K and Bimini, in the 70s and 80s, and caught a lot of bluefins. And I had the privilege of catching my first one with him in the Bahamas, and my first, southern bluefin, southern bluefin, and always wanted to do it as a captain. I always kind of looked up to all those guys who were good at it because they were always kind of the best of the best. To be able to sight fish these fish and find them, put the bait, present the bait properly, and get a bite was just something that always fascinated me. I kind of grew up around a lot of those guys and never got to do it. And that year I was fishing on the Wees and the Keys with Scott Robbins in a tournament up in the Abacos. And on the way home, looking at the weather, it was going to be south winds. And so I kind of begged Scott, can we go give it a shot on our way home? Let's just roll around to the south and see if we can go to Bimini for one night and just give us even a half a day, in Bimini and Cat K, and see if we can get a shot. And if we don't, by noon or 1 o'clock, let's go, we'll burn it home. And so that was a fish that we saw up on the reef. There were two of them, and I circled the boat around and got ahead of them and got a bite out of them. And it turned out, ironically, to be my first bluefin as a captain sight fishing and Scott's first bluefin ever. And
Wow.
the irony was we had gone to Nova Scotia a couple of years earlier and struck out. So it was just that much more special because we had made the trip to Canada to catch one and didn't do it. And
Oh
to do it
man,
on his own boat was just super special.
totally redeemed yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. If you give me enough tries, one of these times I'll hit the ball.
What that one weigh in at?
We just measured it out. It was like a 600-pounder.
Oh my
Wasn't
God.
an enormous fish, but it was just the experience of seeing them swimming in the shallows and getting the bait ahead of them, and the bite's so explosive on the surface,
What
just they
what were you using
come
as
out of the
bait?
way.
I'm sorry if I missed what if you said that
No, it's a
before, but
mackerel, just a
just a
rigged mackerel.
live mackerel,
No, dead rigged
dead
Spanish
rig,
mackerel.
and you're
Yeah.
just what you just pitch it to it like a pitch bait?
No, you get up ahead of them and you let the bait pretty far behind the boat so that you don't spook them with the boat. So you've
Right.
got it back there 200 to 300 feet, and you're trying to make everything connect. You're trying to lead the fish and get the bait in front of them and not spook them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the what's the right word? That's part of the the just the amazing part of sight fishing in the southern, you know, ocean, southern Atlantic. You're in, somewhere in the Bahamas, clean water, trying to find these fish. And you'd think it would be real easy if they're in the sand. Of course, it's a grain of pepper in a bowl of rice. But if it's they're out in the blue, they got dark backs, and you're trying to see them. Sometimes they're 10, 15 feet deep. You're just seeing a color, you're seeing a shadow, and to be able to make it all come together and not push the school down is difficult. And there's not massive schools typically. A lot of times it's a single, two, three, four fish. So
Interesting.
you're kind of looking for a needle in a haystack.
Sight fishing bluefin. I didn't even know that was like a fishery. That just
Hmm.
opened my eyes to that. It's so crazy.
So
I,
when I
yeah.
worked for the Kellys on the Tropicat, that boat I ran from 79 to 99, we would end up in Cat Cay a lot in the springtime, and all the icons were there. Bill Harrison, Bobby Grant, Gary Stuve, Peter Wright, um, Danny Bear. Um, I know I'm missing a couple more. Alex Adler on who'd run Johnny Morris's boat, the Tracker, and Charles Perry would be there. All these iconic people, and then kind of before my time was Alan Merritt, Bill and George Steros. And these were the guys that were just the kings. They were absolutely the kings. These were the guys that had done it all, and this was the pinnacle. And when you were good at bluefin tuna fishing from a tower, you were at the top of your game.
That was
So
my
I grew
question.
up.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but please remember what you're
Yeah.
about to say. That was my question. When you're running this, are you up in the tower when you're running the boat?
Oh yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. And
Yep.
so when you're bluefin tuna fishing, you 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 absolutely require the tower in order to have the advantage of better vision, right? Because you got to see, the further away you see them, the more time you have to position the boat and get the bait out. Because remember, there's a lot of barracudas down there. So on that reef in the Bimini Cat Cay area, there's tons of barracudas. So you might sneak your bait out. One of the things you do is hold your hand on the line once you lock it up, and you feel the doink, wind it in quick because you probably got a half a bait. They cut the tail off.
Got it.
So there's lots of little challenges, right? But as a young man, I would rub shoulders with these guys, but I was never good enough, or I was never in that league, right? So I'd watch them leave, and I'd watch them bring back a tuna, and they're always kind. They'd let you take a chunk, and I would take tuna home, and it was just something that always fascinated me. And one year, I was down there again. I'm like the water boy, and Alan and Merritt and Bill Steros, who were the original kings, right? They invited me to go fishing with them on Alan's boat, and and I was just blown away. I cannot believe they're going to actually bring me into the you know into the inner circle. So we go out, and I'm thinking, man, are we marlin fishing today, or are we bluefin tuna fishing? I'm just waiting for the heavy tackle. Next thing you know, Bill walks out, and he's got yo-yos. I'm thinking, yo-yos, what are we doing? We're catching
What?
bait to go marlin fishing. Or we go anchor the boat, and all those guys want to do is catch yellowtails and have a tournament. And it taught me something that day, that here these guys are who were the absolute kings of their craft. And I think Alan Merritt had won, I don't know, 5 or 6 of the bluefin tournaments in Cat Cay over the years. And Bill
Wow.
Steros won so many tournaments. Jojo Del Gurcio was his boss, and they fished all over the world, including Australia. And Jojo was the man. Jojo was the guy. If you were in a tournament, you kept your eyes on where he was and what they were doing. And that was George and Bill Steros, 2 brothers running the boat. And they just did so many amazing things during their era. They were ahead of their time. So here we go. We go anchor out, and we are catching yellowtails. And I realize it's not the size of the fish. it's the competition. It's the challenge of being better than the guy next to you. And that's all it boiled down to. They didn't care if they were catching yellowtails. They were in a life or death tournament. It was so fun to watch. They were yelling at each other and calling each other losers. And, you know, I'll never forget that day. It's probably one of the coolest moments of my, career as far as, rubbing shoulders with some real iconic guys. Those were the best guys. And they're both gone now, but I'm so happy I had that time with them.
Oh man, sounds like such a special, like one of those moments where you feel like, man, I finally made it.
Yeah.
I finally earned my spot at the table, maybe, like
at least they let me wash the boat. I felt like I was part of the team.
Yeah.
Funny. But now that I've mentioned all those names, you can go back and look it up online and just pay attention to what the early boats look like. In the beginning, they literally had a pole with like a crow's nest in the very beginning with like guy wires. And then slowly, I think the Merritts were the ones, Alan Merritt, and now, his son was Roy Merritt, who now runs Merritt. And they helped design the tuna tower, and that's what it was for. And then I had another really interesting experience about 10 years ago, roughly. I got a chance to film a show with the Costa Del Mar. It's called Bluefin on the Line. Look it up when you can. It is one of the coolest documentaries of bluefin tuna fishing in the Bahamas that you will ever see. They made a I don't even know how long, 30, 45-minute video going back and chronicling the Merritt family and, their role in bluefin tuna fishing. And then, just the history in general of all these other people. And then a little history on Bimini, some of the captains in Bimini, and then the show was really about the three generations of Merritt. So we had Alan, Roy Sr., and Roy Jr. fishing for Roy Jr.'s first and only bluefin tuna in the Bahamas. And Bill Harrison was the captain. I was the mate. And we caught about an 800-pounder. And
wow,
it was just the most incredible. You'll see the emotion if you watch this video.
Oh, I'm going to.
We were all so jacked up. It was so exciting, and sad to say, Roy Jr. is no longer with us. So, in my kitchen, I have a big portrait that he had done for me of a painting from Kerry Chin of that our day. With the Caliban.
Oh, that's amazing.
Catching a bluefin tuna, and it's on my kitchen. I think of Roy Jr. and Roy Sr. and Alan every day.
I would love if you could send me a picture of that later. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I will.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. It just touched my heart that I was, again, just happy to be part of the team and got to ride the tower with Bill, and Amanda Perryman at the time was with Costa, and she had an amazing set of eyes. And so the three of us are up in the tower, and it was so funny. She saw, probably half the bluefins, and Bill and I are looking at each other like, what's wrong with us? She's a dear friend. They filmed their whole documentary.
I can't wait to watch it. I was just going to say, whenever I get the chance to be out on a sport fishing boat with a tower, I am immediately in the tower. I love spotting fish. I love watching them come up in the spread from the tower. I mean, to me, to be able to call down to the crew and be like, left teaser or whatever, to me, that is just as much fun for me as catching a fish. And I love being the tower guy. Like when we went to Guatemala and won the 5th annual billfish tournament there that Peter invited me to, part of the reason we won is because so the captain he's Guatemalan, through and through. Like he understands the word sailfish, fish, yes and no. There's a major language barrier there. But
sure.
I noticed on the first day that his whole style was to keep his eyes on the spread the entire time. So he was not looking in front of him at all. Right, so I would sit up with him when it wasn't my turn to be on the rod, or whatever, to throw the pitch bait. And I would sit up there with him. He didn't have a tower, but I would sit up on the top of them, and I would spot sails jumping, and I'd be like, sailfish, and I'd point in the direction. Yeah. And the first time I could tell he was kind of hesitant to listen to me. Yeah. But then we had 3 on, And then he listened to me for the next 3 days. And I'm pretty sure that strategy played into us winning because we were a very inexperienced team. I mean, besides me, who has a little bit experience sail fishing, a lot of experience deep sea fishing. Besides me, it was like, and I'm not trying to throw shade on my team at all, but we were the underdogs. It was my friend Dan, who's a college kid, who's catches stripers up north, Amal, and her husband, and an older couple that they do a lot of boating, but they don't do a lot of fishing. I mean, and we're up against like Peter and like George Goads or Gods or whatever his name is. And I was going into that tournament thinking, I'm just going to be happy if, we just don't come in last place. I'll be stoked about that. And then somehow, in the last 2 hours of the tournament on the last day, we had gotten bumped from first to third. And I went up, my dad had passed away a month before, and I went up to the bow of the boat. I always had tried to catch a sailfish with him my whole life. We never did. I went up to the bow of the boat. I said a prayer to him. I said, Dad, I know we can win this. I just need your help right now. And I know you are on this boat with me right now. I just need your help. Literally 10 minutes later, I spot a giant bait ball, like maybe a mile away. And I'm like, wow. That's it. That's it right there. Sped over to it, circled the bait ball for the last 2 hours of the tournament. I think we caught 12 sails in 2 hours. I honestly think it might have been something like 16 sails in the last 2 hours. We ended up winning. We had 63 fish, and I think we ended at 63 sails in 3 days, and we ended up winning by, I think, like 11 or 12 in the end.
Wow.
But you should have seen that award ceremony. When they announced that we won, it was a very light applause.
Clap.
But Peter was proud of me. Peter's such a good guy through and through, and I got up on the podium and gave a nice speech about my dad and everything, and I think that kind of loosen people up about losing to us, because they're like, oh, this kid was gonna win from the beginning. He had his dad's ghost behind him. Like, come on.
Right.
But that was just such an incredible experience, and I thank Peter for that every day without him even knowing. But awesome. I'm actually going back down with 5 other guys from the club. We're going to Casa Vieja Lodge for 4 days, 3 days, 4 nights in January. So
that's awesome.
No tournament this time, but it's definitely going to be fun. It's going to be really
there's
fun.
going to be a tournament. It's just not official.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Always
there definitely is. There definitely is.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a little bit about your time in Australia, because it sounds like that was a very special time for you there to fish the Great Barrier Reef and target giant black marlin. I've personally been there. I've scuba dived the Great Barrier Reef. It is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, next to, a few other things, but it's just such an incredible place. And I've always dreamed, like, that is my ultimate bucket list trip, is black marlin on the Great Barrier Reef during black marlin season. So tell me about your time there.
Well, I filmed a show with Peter Wright a year or so before, and we had a really good day of fishing, and caught multiples in a single engine boat. And Peter was very complimentary and just said, you need to get over to the reef sometime. And I just thought it was a passing comment, and I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. But about a year later, he called me. He says, listen, I got a situation. I'm getting inducted in the Hall of Fame in the middle of my big game season, and I'm going to be gone about 3 to 4 weeks. And I need to see if you could find a client that would book the boat. I'll spend a week with you and fish that guy, or 5 or 6 days. We'll go on a trip up the reef, and I'll give you the crash course, and then I'll come back and you can take the next few weeks, with 1 or 2 or 3 clients, whatever you need to book. And if you can do that, I'd love to do it with you. And I mean, I just couldn't believe that he was saying what he was saying. And it just was such a dream, just like you, this is always the ultimate, spot that I wanted to someday go to. And the best part was to be able to go there and fish with Peter, which I was always friendly with him. Like I said earlier, being in Cat Cay and meeting him over there, decades earlier, I always looked up to him. And um, so I told my wife, who was pregnant with our second
Oh
child,
gosh.
how like I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to pull this off?
Yeah,
And
how
it's
am I
like
going to swing this one?
yeah, it's like the only thing. I mean, put it this way, I knew I had to go. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts.
Right.
And so I only back up. I made one call to Don Wall, a friend that I had fished with in Miami on my boats, and he had mentioned black marlin in Australia, and he immediately said yes, and I'll go for the whole time. He was
Of course, right?
he was an amazing guy that just he owned a bunch of pharmacies in South Carolina, and just he would go sheep hunting for 2-3 weeks at a time. So for him, he was the perfect guy for this mission.
Yeah.
And he said yes. Now I had to figure out, how do I convince my wife to let me go, and we've got, our kids are 19 months apart, so we're going to have 2 babies in diapers, and I'm thinking, this is not good. So I sit her down and tell her that I really want to go do this, and she goes, "That's awesome." And I'm thinking, wow, I love this woman.
God. You're
And
like,
I go,
wow,
so
I didn't know I could love you anymore, but I do
yeah,
now.
right.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, I said to her, I said, "So you're going to be okay?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm going to be fine, because I'm going to be with you." I go, "With me? So you're going to leave the babies with grandma and grandpa?" She goes, "No, they're going with us." And I said, "So how are you going to fish with me if you got the baby?" She goes, "Oh, my mom and dad are going." I swear to you, that was the length of the conversation, like less than 60 seconds. She had it mapped out. And that's exactly what happened. And we spent a month in Australia, and just, she wasn't on the boat the whole time. She actually would get on the dive boat. Remember, the Great Barrier Reef's like 32 miles offshore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she rented a townhouse in, so you got Cairns to the south and Cooktown to the north. And Port Douglas is right in the middle. So since she didn't know which dock I would be at, because like once you're out on the reef and you come in for provisions, Lizard Island is up to the north, and the Ribbon Reefs are up to the north. So you just leave the Ribbon Reefs and go straight inshore 32 miles, go to Cooktown, laundry, groceries, etc. Go straight back out. So once you're in the middle of your trip, you don't go back to Cairns. Cairns is the home port, like 100 miles south.
Got it.
So she got a townhouse, and she would jump on the dive boat, and they'd have this big platform, like a big floating dock out on the Barrier Reef. And she would actually get off the dive boat, and I'd go pick her up, and, like to finish out my last 2 or 3 days.
It's like a movie,
so we got
man.
to do that a couple
Your
times.
life is like a movie, Ray. They need to fuck a book. They need to make a movie about you, dude.
Well, you're not hearing about the times when the engine broke and the.
No, well, that's part of it too. It
Yeah.
all goes into it. But yeah, no, that is.
Well,
Oh
we
my
had
God.
we have our ups and our downs, but the highs are very, very, very good.
So, what were
We've had
some of the highs
really
of
good-
that trip?
Well, diving the Barrier Reef with Peter in the mornings, he
Oh my
was
God,
totally
there's
enamored with the marine life. And,
nothing like. I am sorry to interrupt you, but there is nothing like a morning dive on the Great Barrier Reef where you go down. You go down right before the sun comes up, and you go down, and there's like not even really any activity yet. The fish aren't even really moving yet. But once that first ray of sunlight comes up and hits that water, it's like a fish highway just opens up, and there's sharks and parrotfish and
I remember the
giant
lionfish.
and giant clams. Oh my God,
the clams! You would touch them with, you take a, like a dead piece of sea fan or something, and touch them, and man, they'd clamp down like in an instant. You just think to yourself, man, if I ever accidentally, like what always went through my mind is, what if I'm down there and I'm trying to, mess with a crab or look at something, and I reach over by accident to push off the reef, and my hand goes in a clam. You're done.
Game over.
That is where you're dying, because you're free diving.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my God. You guys were free diving. You weren't even using tanks.
Right.
Oh
yeah,
wow.
It was, you're anchored in like 10 to 20 feet of water.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just so cool. And just the stories, having Peter, and then Don Wall had been around the world many times doing, just to be in the company of really iconic, legendary guys in their own right. Just the laptop pictures, the stories, and just remember, you're just living on a boat for 4 or 5 days.
So cool.
And you come in, and fishing was a little slow when we were there. We had a fair amount of shots. Our biggest fish was 500, I'd say. And, just but the experience, honestly, was the company I spent that first 4 or 5 days in the tower with Peter Wright going up the reef to Cooktown. And for the stories that came out of that man's mouth, I said to him one time, I'm like, I just wish I was recording all of this.
Oh man.
And, he passed away about a year and a half ago. And it just meant more now than ever. And what a cool guy. He was he was the pioneer. So here's some trivia that's just amazing to me. I filmed with Peter Wright and with Peter Bristow. Both of them were there in the late 60s, and they were pioneering because both of those guys fished for bluefin tunas in Kaki. They knew how to fish heavy tackle. They knew how to make the connections, for all the knots and so on and crimps, and they just knew proper rigging, right? So they took that technology to Australia when Australia was identifying enormous fish that they couldn't stop. And so those Peter Wright and Peter Bristow fished with, I think it was George Farnsworth was the real head. I may have the last name wrong, but that's what I remember. But those guys got to fish, with George, and of course, in boats around George as time went on. They got their own boats, and they all just kind of branched off. And we're there at the ground floor of big game fishing in Australia. And the ironic thing was Peter Wright had documented 77 marlin over 1,000 pounds, and Peter Bristow documented 55. That's what
Wait. Bring that stat back for a second.
So Peter Bristow
Yeah.
had documented 55 marlin on the scale over 1,000 pounds.
Oh my
and Peter
God.
Wright had documented 77. I made TV shows with both of them, so I spent days with them. And of course,
so 50,
like I told
55 plus 77, I can't do the math real quick, but whatever that amount is, that amount
132,
132, that is the amount of granders that they documented.
Yep. And here's the best part of this.
Unbelievable.
You want to know the most unbelievable stat was I asked both of them the same question. I said, of the fish that you released, how many do you think made the mark that you didn't kill? And they both told me the exact same answer, independent of each other. They both said double.
What?
So that would put Peter Bristow at like 150 and Peter Wright at 200. And at the same time, Peter Wright told me something that was interesting, which was really cool that he was this honest. He goes, although I'll tell you that I weighed an 1,100 pounder one time that turned out to be like 995. And I weighed a fish that I called 850 that turned out to be 1,050. So he said, it's all about girth. You can get a long, skinny fish that looks enormous, but he's 995. He had the length of a 1,200 pounder, but I called him 11 because I knew he was skinny. But he was so skinny, he didn't make the mark. And then I had that fish that I thought was 850, but he was real fat. And, he weighed 1,050. So I could be wrong, but I still believe, factoring all that in, I still believe I released double the amount of 1,000 pounders than I killed. And Peter Bristow said the exact same thing a different time.
That's crazy.
So obviously that's an estimate, right?
And this is around what time of what decade?
So they fished mainly 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s.
Okay, so this is when that reef was still like totally pristine. And
well, here's the real stat. The real statistic is, of your clients that you fish in a season, how many are willing to put one on the scale? And so that's why their numbers weren't higher, because in the old days, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was not frowned upon whatsoever, especially 70s and 80s. It was like during the days of Kurt Gowdy and American Sportsman. There was just great pride in accomplishing, something in the new world of big game fishing. And big game hunting. You remember, at least when I was a kid, I used to watch Kurt Gowdy and that, American Sportsman, and they would show things like shooting an elephant or shooting a lion or killing a big marlin. That's the era I grew up in. And today, you can imagine if that was on TV, it would just get vilified. It would just
Absolutely.
be protested. And I'm not taking sides. I'm simply reporting the facts. So the reason those guys will end up being probably the two guys that document the most granders ever killed is today, and that they both said the same thing. As the decades went by, fewer people would hang them. And that's why I asked the question. I knew that. And so I wanted to know in your later years, how many did you release that you thought were at the mark? And that's how that was accomplished. That's how they only killed a third of what they thought they caught in 1,000-pound fish, is because they killed that third in the really early years. In later years, very, very few of them got to make the scale. And I understand why. Those are big females, and I'm not taking sides. I'm simply saying that's what happened.
Yeah. No, I totally
But
get it.
but it is the benchmark, the absolute benchmark of skill and talent that those two guys held. So I look at it this way. I got to fish with two of the guys that will have gone down in history, probably at least in our lifetime, if not 20 lifetimes, will have been the ones that killed the most, captured the most and documented the most 1,000-pound fish. So those two guys, Peter Bristow is still alive and still chartering in Madeira if anybody has the interest. If I were in a position to do it, I would go to Madeira and fish with Peter Bristow before it's too late.
Yeah.
He's still alive. I want to say he's in his 80s, but he's still running his charter boat out of Madeira. And
God bless
we
him.
just
That's
lost.
amazing.
Yeah, we just lost Peter Wright. But man, that's what I think about when I think of Australia. Just the big fish that changed the scene of sport fishing and marlin fishing. That's where you went to test your knowledge and your skill.
The ultimate gauntlet.
Yeah, super cool place.
Such a
Super
cool
cool
place,
people.
man. I would love to get back there. I keep
Yeah.
reading articles about how the Great Barrier Reef is like significantly
Yeah.
decreasing, and it's getting I don't know if they're doing like dredging or something. I don't know exactly what's going on over there, but
Well,
I
lots of
have
talk
read that
about
it's not doing that well. So
there's lots of talk about the coral die off, and then I hear other stories where people are there firsthand and saying, yeah, there's coral that's dying, but there's lots of colonies of coral that's emerging too. So I can't really comment on what the final word is, but
yeah,
it is something worth researching. The one thing I learned in Australia is we were fishing baits up to 20 pounds, so the outrigger clips were a challenge, to hold that much pressure. So
right.
that's what really inspired the R2 clips that we make. I came home and designed those for heavy pressure, and they'll hold. I've lifted 20 pounds off the floor with them. So not bragging, I'm saying it was a great
Yeah,
learning experience to go over there, because you learn things that, well, you see things you never saw before. I never saw fishing with a 15, 20-pound bait until I got there. And then you realize why, because that's an appropriate size bait for the fish you're trying to catch.
yeah. When you were there, did you hook any other types of marlin?
No, there are blue marlin out in the deep water, and we
Uh-huh.
never made that loop offshore. And I really regret it, because there were days, where it was really slow on the reef. We never had a bite. And I just wish on those days, if I knew that in advance, I would have just put the lures out and headed offshore.
Right.
There are blue marlin out in the deeper water, but the blacks generally range right up against the reef.
That's so cool. They're just cruising the reef like that. Unbelievable.
It's such a breathtaking sight. You got all these ribbon reefs, and they're all kind of horseshoe shaped,
Yeah.
and you go up behind them, and the wind blows at the front of the horseshoe, and you come around the back and get up in that cove and drop your anchor. And so you're 32 miles offshore,
Yeah.
sleeping, just the boat is barely moving. And I had some of my best night's sleep out there on the reef.
Oh man, me too. When I was out there for that dive trip, we went out
Mhm.
on the dive boat. We were out there for I think it was like 12 days, and you could
Mhm.
do 3 dives a day, morning,
Yeah,
afternoon, night dives.
right.
And I had this one night dive where I was down there, and they have those it's a type of parrotfish called, it's like a rockhead parrotfish. It's got
Yeah,
that
yeah.
giant bump on its head.
Yep.
and my light died, but
Oh boy.
my buddy's light behind me was still going. But I could kind of still see in front of me, but I was like the fish couldn't see me as much. And all of
Yeah.
a sudden, right to our left, a giant school of, like, I'm talking 50 to 80 pound rockhead parrotfish cruised
Wow.
by us, and they didn't see me. And I just reached out and touched one's tail, and it just went poof and just took off.
Wow.
And it was just such an unforgettable experience, man. I mean,
That's so cool.
night diving on the reef there, they tell you, yeah, there's no great white sharks attack divers or anything, and this and that,
Uh-huh.
and then you come to find out a week before, like at that dive site, like a 15-foot tiger like demolished
Oh
a
yeah.
80-pound loggerhead or whatever,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
like they tell you after
Oh
you get
yeah.
out of the water, and the Australian guides like have a big kick about it.
Yeah. If you saw some of the videos I saw, like Peter would show us some of the old videos where they'd, remember they're 30 miles offshore, they'd kill this big marlin. There's only so much, if they wanted to eat any of it, it wasn't much. So they'd hang it behind the boat at night, and these tigers would come up and they would take your breath away. I mean, their heads were, 3 feet wide. I mean, it was just
Oh my God.
unbelievable. And they would just gorge themselves on these marlin. It just was a night shark show.
Oh my God.
Yeah, crazy
So
stuff.
when these
But
guys, during those decades when hanging the fish wasn't as frowned upon, what was
yep.
happening to the meat of those fish? Was it getting consumed, or was it
No,
no?
no, for the most part, they're 30 miles offshore. And, that
Oh,
was
right,
just
right.
that.
So by the time they get it back to the scale, it's not even, the meat
Yeah.
isn't even good, right? Okay, gotcha.
Now, like all the fish that I caught in Bermuda, every single one of those marlin that we killed there in the tournaments, um, I filleted. And bottom line, the meat on a marlin is actually delicious. And I
Really?
smoked, make pokey. Yeah, every marlin we caught, I'd hang up, and just cut from the tail. Hanging by the tail. I just started the tail and start cutting quarters off. And the coolest part in Bermuda is all the residents would show up at the city park. They don't really have a gallows, so they would hire a crane, walk the fish out of your cockpit for the tournament. It was a big event, and hundreds of people would show up, and they'd usually bring little grocery bags, or they'd run to the store and get some little grocery bags. And it was the coolest thing to just give the meat to the residents, and then I would, of course, take some for my boat, my guys, and then some for me to take home. And not one of the marlin that we ever caught. I probably killed 4 or 5 in Bermuda over the years, and every single one of them we filleted down to the bone.
Wow. Good for
Yeah.
you, man. That's awesome to hear that. What is
Yeah.
what's the best cut on the marlin? What's the best piece to eat?
Like anything, the top loin is always the
Right.
best. The back strap, right? The prime
Yeah.
rib.
What about
But
the belly meat?
well, it's not the same as tuna belly. It
Yeah.
does get fatty, but it's not the same. It's not the same meat. It's a marlin is more of a grayish white meat, and it doesn't look that great, but it tastes wonderful. And of course, I would try to do things like keep the fish cool, wet. Most of the time when you kill a marlin in Bermuda, you weren't, first of all, it usually wasn't first thing in the morning. It's usually by the time one that's big enough to boat takes a while.
Right.
So, most of the time we'd land them in the afternoon, and sometimes we just put them in the boat and run home, because it was at the end of the day or near the end of the day. And so the meat, I would try to keep them wet and cool, maybe even put some ice on them. And the meat was always really good. We'd make pokey. I fished with Andy Moyes a lot, the lure maker. He and I worked the cockpit on the Wees and the Keys a lot of years. And he had lived in Hawaii and Costa Rica charter fishing, and he learned all. He's a great cook, and he showed me so many cool pokey recipes and seared marlin. It was like Forrest Gump. We had it every way you could.
That's great.
Yeah,
Marlin
I just think, yeah,
gumbo.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, seared marlin, smoked marlin, pokey marlin,
Have you ever heard of
marlin
this?
sushi.
Oh, marlin sushi. That sounds
Oh yeah, we ate it
awesome,
raw.
man. What?
Yeah, yeah,
Just eating a rare exotic fish. It's
yeah.
so,
We'd roll it in sesame seeds and
so
sear it and then
badass.
slice it. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of this website, granderwatch.com?
I've heard of it, but I don't think I am on it.
Oh, it's just it's not like a community or anything. It's like you just go on it, and I don't know who's behind it. I'd love to have him on the podcast if he ever hears this, but it's some guy out there who has been documenting for the past, I think, maybe 10, 15 years. He's been trying to document all the granders that have been caught, where they've been caught. And one of the guys in the past 5 years who's been absolutely crushing it is out in, I think it's the Cape Verde Islands.
Yeah, Marty Bates.
Yeah. And he,
Yeah, I fished with him there.
wait, you know the guy I'm talking about? He's got like
I fished.
long black hair. He's caught 3 granders in the past 5 years.
Well, Marty Bates, I fished with him during the World Cup with Stephanie Choate.
Oh, wow. But
Yeah.
is that the guy I'm talking about? Do you think?
Well, yeah, Marty Bates runs the charter boat, one of the charter boats in Cape Verde. He's full time.
Oh, that's so cool. I gotta stalk him down and get him on the show.
I got his number if you want it,
Dude. We'll I'm writing it down right now. We will talk about that after. Have you fished Cape Verde?
Yeah, I fished it on the 4th of July with Stephanie Choate, with on Marty's boat. So
Tell me that story.
Well, it's a really short story because we never had a bite. But I take that back. I think we had one bite and pulled them off. That was it. But it was sad because the day before there was a 700 caught, I want to say an 800 hooked, and a 650 something, 600 something got towed in, died on them. And then a couple more big ones seen that didn't bite, had shots at them or pulled them off right away. And I remember thinking, there's 14 boats fishing the World Cup tomorrow. And if there were, 6 big ones seen here by, let's say, 8 boats, what's going to happen tomorrow?
Right.
Like, it's going to be a bloodbath. How many are going to get killed?
Yeah.
And do you know, nobody killed one that day.
Wow.
The water kind of changed overnight, went green. And that happens. I saw it happen in Bermuda. The water turns over and the fish move. So,
that was a tough one, huh? I mean, that's a long way to travel to get skunked.
Well,
part of the game, though. I guess after a while, you just get used to it, right?
Yeah.
Or do you not? Does it still suck every time?
No, it was actually, to be honest with you, it was a great, great experience because, I got to meet, Oleg and, there was just so many like iconic guys over there that were kind of part of that Eastern Atlantic world. They'd take their boats to the Azores or to Ascension, wherever they went, up and down the coast, Madeira. These guys were hardcore. And Zach, so you had Zach Condi, he ran one of the charter boats, and Oleg, and that guy's just like a beast, giant guy. They're like German, looks like they could pinch your head off with their fingers. And, then Marty Bates. And there's just, it's been my experience in a lot of places. I fished Africa, Bermuda, Australia, and then Cape Verde, west coast of Africa. All those places, you meet some of the coolest people that are from the earth. I mean, they are just down to earth, hardworking. And as much as you think that there's a lot of cool guys in America, you got to remember we have the privilege of equipment and technology that those guys don't have. Like talking to those guys in Cape Verde, you sat around with them one night just talking, listening mostly to stories, and they'd talk about, basically they're pioneering new spots, like when I'm trying to remember Clay Hensley and James Roberts and a couple other guys pioneered Ghana. Think about that. They had like to float drums of diesel fuel with a little air in the drum, with tighten the lids, and float the drum out to the boat. Or once they built the dock, eventually they could like Medmore, drop their anchor and get the start. The dock, like the dock may not even be strong enough if it's windy at all to support the boat banging up against it. So they would just Medmore and they'd run a hose from the fuel drum on the dock out to the boat. Like these guys struggled just to get the boat fueled. And then when something would break, waiting on parts and,
Right.
mentioned they had to have spare parts in advance, water pumps and this and that. And these guys are the real kings, in my opinion. These are the guys that suffered through so many hardships to just catch the fish they caught. The guys in America, we pick up the phone and we have a technician at our boat.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that's to me one of the beautiful things about travel is that you get to experience things that you would never see if you stayed at home. And it's not necessarily beauty, it's struggle, it's
Right.
innovation,
Exactly.
it's being able to figure out problem solving. And those are really important skills in life. And I always appreciated seeing so much of that in those faraway places. And the other thing I saw was happiness. I really saw those guys to be some of the happiest people because they struggled to accomplish and they got such rewards out of their accomplishments. Whereas, I always think of that when I'm here and, say in Miami, I'll hear some young captain go, "Yeah, I kind of sucked today. We only caught 5." And thinking to myself, like sailfish,
Yeah. Yeah.
or because maybe Joe or Bob caught 10, right? And they only
Right.
caught 5. So this sucked. And I just think to myself, you're missing it. You are missing the point. You woke up this morning and you are one of the luckiest people on the planet to
Right.
get to go fishing for a living and to be able to take people like yesterday and the day before. I took groups that, just were so happy to catch a couple sails. And, the 2 days ago, 3 people caught their first sailfish. And Bill Harrison told me that when I was 17 years old working for him. We were driving to Key West to do our week-long commercial trip. And something came up about the job and, life plans. And Bill said to me, I'll never forget it. He goes, I want you to remember this. He said, if you wake up in the morning and you're driving to the boat and you're doing something you enjoy, you are one of the luckiest people on this planet. And I never forgot that. And he was 100% right. And, at the IGFA thing the other night, that's kind of how I started out. The talk was, I've always told my kids and my crew that there are 2 kinds of riches because, trying to give them a perspective on, what's being a fisherman like. Yeah, you make some money, but those aren't the riches that matter. Those are the riches that pay the dockage and the fuel. But the riches that really matter are the ones that don't fit in your wallet. That's what I call them. They don't fit in your wallet because they are too big.
Yep.
And those are the relationships with the Peter Wrights and the Stephanie Choate and the list. I could just go on and on. The Andy Moyes, the people that I got to fish with over the years, Charles Perry, guys that are, Curly, that we won the championship in Bermuda together. The only Bermudian to win the Triple Crown of Bermuda was Curly. The guy who had the privilege of being, just being present, and it was so cool. Those are the things that just money can't buy, and that's those are the riches that fishing has given me, and I'm so thankful.
So it's like the first set of riches, which isn't as important, but kind of is that first set of riches, the money is what supports the real riches, which is
Correct.
The ones that can't fit in your wallet. So it does go hand in hand, but yeah, the real ones can't fit in your wallet, man. I love that.
It's true. It is so true.
It's so true. And another thing about traveling too, like sometimes when you go to these third world countries, at least when I went to Guatemala, that was the first time I had been to a third world country, and I came home with a whole new respect or respect, love, counting my blessings, gratefulness, whatever you want to call it. But I came home a changed man after seeing how people live there. I mean, it's like we are so lucky. Like you can go get food anywhere. You could go to a McDonald's, you go to Chick-fil-A, you can go to Publix, like anything, like. And then you see the guys that are fishing on the pengas, and you're out on the sport fishing boat, and you're 60 miles offshore, and you see these guys on the pengas just trying to irk out a living,
Yep.
And they've probably been out there for God knows how long, maybe a week or whatever it is,
Yep.
And they're in these little pengas with like a tarpaulin covering the top of it, and it's like catch fish or die trying, and it's traveling definitely gives you a whole new respect for living in America and everything that we are so blessed to have here. Are there any other places left that you want to fish still?
Whew. At this point, I'm just happy to go visit old friends in some of the places I've been. I'm not saying that going to Ascension or Azores or Madeira, those are 3 places I haven't been. Hawaii, another place, Alaska. Those are all 5 places that I'd love to go, but if I don't make it, I'm not gonna be disappointed. But
right,
it is cool to have goals and dreams.
Yeah. What would you say is your top place out of those places? Alaska, maybe?
Ooh, I don't know, man. I can't tell you till I go.
Some of the guys from our club went to Alaska a couple years ago, and they got a giant halibut. Looked so cool. Looked like a lot of fun. They caught those lingcod too that have the blue fillets. They look like aliens or something. That place looks cool. I would love to do that. Oh man, such good stuff, Ray. Let me look at one more picture here. This picture of you're kneeling in front of a giant sword, and there's 2 guys to your right. You know what picture I'm talking about?
Is it the fish is laying in the back of the boat on the floor?
Yep. And
so
let me ask you this real quick before you start that story. This sword and the one we talked about before where you were holding your son, were they were not caught on electric reels, were they?
No, both of those were hand cranks.
Got it. Okay, cool. So in this picture, you're using a hand crank reel. How deep are you fishing for that sword? Or just tell me the whole story. Go for it.
We're probably 14 to 1,600 feet of water. Randy Cooper was the client. He's a dear friend. I actually fished St. Thomas with he and his wife, and on the Shufflebarger's boat, the HT Hook. And, they just had family in town and wanted to fish out of Miami. They live in Miami. And we caught that fish in about 2 hours at night. The guy sitting next to me is Jason Cartwright. He still works on our boats. We've been together for, I think, pushing 22 years. So really, really great people that I got to share that with. And that was the biggest fish I caught at night. We didn't weigh him, but, somewhere in that 400 to 500 pound range. And just a really great fish. I filleted him and weighed the fillets. That's all I had the capability of weighing it. The fillets were 125 pounds each.
Wow.
So, give or take a pound. And so that was 250 pounds of fillet, whatever that turns that into. I don't know. That's the only thing we could weigh. We didn't have a big enough scale.
How long was the fight on that one?
That one was only 2 hours because
only 2.
On a hand crank, because he was hooked underneath the jaw and the line wrapped around his bill like a full revolution. Kind of kept his mouth shut. He had trouble breathing. But that fish should have been, honestly, on stand-up gear. That fish easily could have gone 4 hours. It was a big one. That's the biggest one we caught at night. We caught quite a few 300 pounds.
It's crazy, man. This other picture here with younger Peter Miller, World Sailfish Championship, Keys Caribbean, Get Lit, April 21st, 2007, $100,000, 2007 World Champions. Tell me that story.
Yeah. Well, that was the second time we won it. We won it, I think, in 2003, the first year they had the tournament, and I just didn't have a picture of that one. But, it was just an amazing tournament. Again, Kit and Peter just made it look easy. Those guys were like automatic, and we got to win it 2 times together. So it was just, memories you never forget, the riches that don't fit in your wallet,
Yep. I think we actually might have talked about that one on part 1 a little bit. How about this picture where Peter's in this one too. You're holding, I think, your son. He's got one shoe on. And you're holding these trophies. What was that one?
Man, I'm trying to remember that picture.
Hold on, let me the Isla Morada Sailfish Tournament.
Oh, yeah, that was the year I think we threw Froggy, the mate, in the water with a life preserver because we got stretched out on a triple and we're running out of line on all 3 rods.
What?
So
Tell me about that. What?
I called Diane Harbaugh, the tournament director, and I mean we had no choice. We're about to get broken off, and we were in second place. We really needed all 3 of these fish, and she gave me permission. I said, Froggy represented the United States in world spearfishing competition in high school. I went to high school with him. I said, this guy is a swimmer. And she said, well, if he feels safe doing it, put a life preserver on him and have somebody watch him while you leave him. We threw him over and went and got Kit and Peter's fish, and I punched it on a plane back to Froggy, and we got his fish. So it made the AP news, and then they banned it. And later,
of course they did. I'm sure the other captains were complaining about it.
Well, the lawyers got a hold of it and said, no way to these tournament directors will you ever endorse somebody getting put overboard to catch fish.
Oh, right, because the liability, right?
Yeah, so that killed all that. But I can say we got to do it once. It was neat.
Well, that is so cool. You're probably the only people to ever do that.
Well, I think it happened a couple other tournaments whose lawyers hadn't heard about it in later years, but I think we were the first.
So what was Frog?
I didn't know what else to do. That's the only thing I could come up with. There's only one way to fix this problem. See you later, Froggy.
Always got to find a solution. What was Froggy's demeanor like going in? Was he all hyped for it, or was he like a little nervous?
100%.
He was all for it.
Animal. Yeah, we did like 16 seasons together. He and I were like brothers, and still are.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
How do you get the nickname Froggy?
Well, he is quite a swimmer. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say he did go into the water with the life jacket.
Yeah, but I mean, he represented the United States in like world competitions, like the Olympic kind of stuff. And
in high school,
yeah, in high school,
That's
he represented
wild.
the United States. He was on like the U.S. spearfishing team as a teenager. Yeah, he's one of those crazy guys that could touch bottom in probably 150 feet or 130 or whatever.
What?
Oh yeah,
that is wild.
I don't know what he can do. He's the guy that's pretty low key. He never tells you, but I know he does some crazy stuff.
That's so cool, man. I have just been writing down these names in my notebook as you're going because I'm gonna look up all these guys. I got Froggy, 2 stars. I don't know where I'm gonna find him. I got Curly. I got Scott Robbins, Bill Harrison, Bobby Grant, Peter Wright, Peter Bristow, Alan Merritt. I know a bit about, but I'm going to look into him more. Randy Cooper.
Yeah.
Oh man.
John Cooper is Froggy's real name.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Is he
John,
related to
Jon?
John Cooper.
Yeah.
So cool, man. So you have made some really good friends, man. Huh?
I got all their cell numbers if you want to talk to them. So.
Oh, Ray, you have no idea how much I appreciate you saying that. I would love to talk to these guys, man. I would absolutely love to.
They probably got better stories than I do.
I don't know about that, dude. I feel like you and me are going to be talking till 3:00 today. We're just going. I got one more picture. The one, I believe it's a giant blue marlin. It's facing towards the cabin. There's 6 people behind it.
Yeah, that's on the Wheeze and the Keys. That's Andy Moyes, Scott Robbins, the owner of the boat, Chris Zielinski, the captain. And that was the biggest blue we ever put in the boat by accident the day before the tournament. It died on tail wrapped, but it was a massive fish. And I filleted that one in the cockpit too. We didn't waste that.
Nice.
It was almost dark and day before the tournament, and we were going to take it in and weigh it. And it was just we were running out of time. We had to make the captain's meeting, and so they said, things stone dead. Rigor mortis dead. And I said, well, at least let me fillet it and save the bill and tail. And they said, okay. And I just made quick work of it and pushed it over the side, and we took the meat in and gave it away and ate some of it. So it was good.
How'd you do the next day?
Nothing. 0.
Did you kind of have a feeling that was going to happen?
Yeah, we burned it up.
Yeah. He used all the mojo.
That's a funny picture to look at, one day early.
One day early. How many times has that happened to you in your career?
Well, the most sailfish I caught in a day was 44 the day before the tournament in Palm Beach. And we caught 26 the next day and didn't win the daily. 28 won the daily.
Maybe don't go fishing the day before the tournaments, Ray.
Yeah, man. Look at those great memories.
No, I know. I'm just messing with you.
Kind of funny when I didn't really put it together until you just asked. But yeah, I've had that happen a couple times.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And each time, did you know, like, okay, that's it. We're not winning the tournament.
Yeah, it kind of felt that way.
Do you feel like the rest of the crew felt that way, or you just felt that way and kept it to yourself? And do you think everybody was kind of like,
you just got to enjoy the day.
I mean, come on, you just caught a 600-pound marlin. I mean, that's got to be as good as winning the tournament, right? So
yeah, no complaints.
No complaints there. Well, listen, the family is up and moving around, and I got to go, unfortunately, Ray. But
all right, man.
Thank you so much for calling in for part 2. I feel like we could even do a part 3, but let me give you a call a little bit later today, and we could talk a little bit more about some of these guys that I might be able to reach out to. I really appreciate that, bro.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, they deserve a moment. Yeah, they're good guys. They all got stories to tell.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and that's what this podcast is really all about. I mean, sometimes I'll do a one-off episode that talks about like fishing techniques, or like I just did an episode on land-based shark fishing and how you can do that and like what goes into that. But normally the focus of the podcast is to capture legendary angler stories and have the Brooklyn Fishing Club podcast be a place that their stories will live forever. After we're all gone, this podcast will still be here and our stories will still be on them. And that's what this is all about for me, is just documenting the stories of as many legends as possible. So,
well, thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you for being on, man. And I got to run, but I will talk to you soon. Thanks again, Ray.
Cool.
All
See you later.
You have a good morning. Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Brooklyn Fishing Club podcast. Next week, we'll have Adrian Moeller, captain of Rockfish Charters, calling in to talk about how he went from working in the hip-hop industry to becoming a full-time charter captain. If you enjoy the show, please leave us 5 stars and a review, and we'll send you a shirt and a pack of stickers free of charge. Until next time, tight lines, my friends.
Hey, don't you walk on me.